Yeah, great. Just to check that you can see the PowerPoint on the screen. Okay. No, it is sharing. Let me just go back into it and see if you can see anything. Nothing yet. How about the students? Oh, can you see the full? Can I see the full presentation? Please shout out. Okay, perfect. So, so Dr. Williams has got something. Yeah. I am recording. Oh, I'm also recording on a different platform, but I can record. Um, oh, it is. It is saying it's recording already. Yeah. Okay. So I will stop recording. Stop. Okay. I've stopped it. I have already, and then I'm going to go in again. I'm recording. In any event, I will put this on YouTube. So just to warn everyone that it will go onto YouTube as well, so that you can watch it forevermore when you go to your masters or when you do it later. Yeah, I will just quickly. Okay, so it is recording. Okay, I will just quickly just say hello. Just to say hello to everyone. Welcome to the workshop on conceptual frameworks. I think it's very important because this not only serves as a basis for your postgraduate PG DIP project, but will also hold you in stead if you do your master's or your doctorate. So let's just hide my camera. It's recording. And let's just go to the workshop.
Professor Duffett, if I may interject.
Yes.
I'm going to watch the hands and the chat, and I'll alert you.
Thank you very much, because I can't see anything. And I'm sharing my screen. If the class can just confirm once again that they can see the screen, that would be great.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So you can see last year there is a YouTube video. I ran a similar class for the PG DIP class in Dr. Williams' class. So there's that YouTube link that you can watch that presentation already. I will, after this class, I will upload this video on YouTube again and then add a 2026 YouTube link, simply because also Blackboard is being phased out. So if you want to access this video later, then it's on YouTube. You'll be able to watch it even in later years if you are busy, as I say, with the master's or doctorate. Right, so let's get started. So conceptual frameworks. So we'll start off with, basically this presentation uses a number of examples. Now, you actually cannot come up with your research title or complete it. You can come up with your research topic, but not your title, your full title, unless you know which theoretical models that you are using. And those theoretical models need to be transformed into your conceptual framework, which is your take. So you can use one or maybe two. I wouldn't suggest three frameworks, and use that on which to base your research. So, and once you know what your conceptual framework looks like, it makes it easy for you to finalize your title. It makes it easy to you to finalize your research questions and objectives, and your hypothesis if it is quantitative research. So this is a vitally important part of the research. So I think before I even go here, let me escape out of this PowerPoint and just show you some examples of theoretical frameworks. So just to get a check that you can see a Word document open and it says theoretical framework examples. Can you see that?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So just to give you some examples of theoretical framework, or what is a theoretical framework? Well, it's basically different models that were developed to measure various constructs, which is different attitudes or attitudinal scales, which were developed over time. And these theoretical frameworks, we can adapt them, we can combine them, we can add some elements to them to form our own conceptual framework. And your conceptual framework really is the research map of your research. It tells you what your research is about. And so, yes, you may have a title, whatever your title may be. I mean, my focus is digital areas, so it may be, you know, if you're doing social media or something on AI or some other marketing aspect, branding, whatever the case may be, it needs to be based on a theoretical framework, one or more of those, which you reformulate into your conceptual framework. So here's some examples. The source credibility model, first, the two major contributors to it was Hoofland in 1953 and then Ohanian in 1990. And it measures three aspects: attractiveness, expertise, and trustworthiness. And this is often used when measuring influences. Obviously, there's been many different models on it afterwards, but it's always important to start with the original authors of the model, from where you can take your Likert scale statements from, and then maybe find a more recent article, because obviously, like, this source credibility model wasn't developed to measure influences. They didn't exist in 1953 or 1990 for that matter. That is social media influencers like Instagram or TikTok or Facebook. So these models were usually developed to measure these tributes on for a different topic altogether. But you need to then adapt their statements to whatever your topic is. So you would start with the original authors, and then maybe if you, so you would have a Ohanian probably as one of the authors where you would take their constructs from. And then maybe a more recent one, say you're measuring chatbots, attractiveness, expertise, and trustworthiness, then you would maybe find a more recent article where they used Ohanian but adapted to chatbots. And between those two sources, you could come up with your Likert scale items. It may sound like I'm speaking a bit of Greek at the moment, but it will make sense when I go to the examples in a moment, what I'm talking about. And this is equally applicable to quantitative and qualitative research. It's just a bit more tricky in qualitative research. So here's the source credibility model. Then we have the hierarchy effects model, which goes awareness, knowledge, liking, preference, all the way to purchase. Lavage and Steiner was the author. I actually based my doctoral thesis on this. You have the perceived risk model, which looks at different risk, time, financial performance, privacy, psychological, physical, and device risk. And there's obviously other versions of this and other types of risks. Another theoretical model is the stimulus organization response model. It's a bit of a nothing model because it doesn't tell you what the stimulus, the organization, and the response is. So you would have to have a second model where you included these variables. So you could not use this model standalone. People often try and use it just like the theory of reasoned action as well. It's also, there aren't fixed constructs for these different items per se, so it's hard to use. It's more of a theory than a theoretical model. So again, if you use this, it would be in conjunction with something else. So a lot of people use this as the underpinning for the model, like TAM was based on this technology acceptance model, but yeah, it's just a theoretical underpinning. Then you get the source attractiveness model. So by Maguire, so it looks at familiarity, likable, and similarity, and their influence on attitudes, brand attitudes, and purchase intention. Obviously, Maguire was the original, and Jiang is another example where I added on some elements. So these three elements, familiarity, likability, and similarity, came from Maguire, and Zhang added these elements, and many other authors. Another one's the advertising value model, which developed by Duffcoat. So it's entertainment, informedness, irritation, advertising value, and their attitude to advertising. Then you have ServQual, which you should be well familiar with, measures various aspects of services. Although if you're looking at e-services, then you can't use this traditional model, because where the hang do you get tangibility in something that's electronic? So I actually have a master student that wants to use this model to look at chatbots, but we're having a problem because of the tangibility. So there's many other authors that adapted it later. So we'll go to the original model, but we need to look at another author as well. Theory of planned behavior, as I say, is another. Yes?
Prof. Duffin, my apologies.
Yep.
There's just one student in the room, Mr. Sego. Please turn off your video. We can see everything you're doing.
So sorry, ma'am. I'm listening very attentively. Sorry, Mr. Duffin.
No problem. I don't mind if people multitask. I can assure you I multitask through lots of things as well. Right, the theory of planned behavior. Again, it's like more of a theoretical model. There aren't fixed constructs for these. So technological acceptance model is very, very popular. Davis. There's external variables, perceived usefulness, ease of use, attitude, behavioral, and actual use. And then there was adaptation to it, TAM2. Here's the trust model, another example of a model. Then you have the UTAUT model, Unified Theory of Acceptance Use Technology, very popular model. Some of my students are using it. Then there's a TAM3. And then you have a source credibility and attractives model that was combined to measure customer brand engagement. So you see how you can combine models. So these are just some, and there are literally thousands of other models. A lot of journal articles, and we'll just say save. A lot of journal articles use these models, but then add their own take. So therefore they're formulating new models. So it's very important that you always, though, try and go back to the original author based on the constructs. So I think the only way I'm going to convey the conceptual framework, so those are the theoretical framework, which is the building blocks for your conceptual framework. So let me kind of go, before I get to all of this. So a student of mine, what was the topic? Looked at chatbots and virtual assistants. Okay. In fact, I think some of you, if in my class last year, this is the research that you would have done. Yes, I think I did last year. So they based their research, they chose the TAM model, and they chose the perceived, in this case, it's the benefits model, because they converted these Likert scale items are generally negatively phrased. In other words, it's a risk, but you can change the Likert scales to be positively phrased, in which case those items become a benefit. So we call this perceived benefit because we phrase these positively. So from these two models, they decided, we worked out the conceptual model to be this. So we took the constructs, we took 5 of the risks, we made them positively phrased: financial risks, social risks, product performance, security, and time benefits. We took these variables, perceived risk and perceived ease of use, from the TAM model. Customer engagement is often in the TAM model as well, so we included that. And we decided to look at these relationships of these benefits and these TAM variables on their general attitudes, which comes from TAM model, and their intention to purchase, which also comes from the TAM. So we took 5 constructs, and each construct is made up of 3 or 4 or 5 different Likert scale statements. So we took the 5 perceived risk model, or perceived benefits in this case, and we took 5 variables from TAM. And so from this, we decided we wanted to see if these benefits had an influence on the general attitudes towards virtual assistants and chatbots, and their intention to purchase in general. And then we took these 3 TAM variables to see if they had an influence on the general attitudes and purchase intention. So each of these lines represents a hypothesis. Furthermore, we wanted to look at the mediation effect. Did positive attitudes mediate a positive effect on intention to purchase based on these 8 variables? Now, it sounds like hieroglyphics, but it doesn't matter. Your supervisors will be able to help you and guide you through this process, or at least I do for my students. But the key is, so you started with these 2 models. You probably would have now found more recent studies on virtual assistants and chatbots that looked at these variables. You have to find other studies that have considered perceived risk and TAM in terms of your topic, because you need to provide a justification for each of these hypotheses. So you need to find other studies that also looked at financial benefits influence on intention to purchase and financial benefits on attitudes. If you cannot find any other studies that looked at these relationships and you're doing a quantitative study, how are you going to justify your hypothesis? You need to be able to tell me that other studies either found positive relationships, negative relationships, or no relationships at all. If there's no relationships, then maybe you should consider a qualitative study where you can explore those relationships qualitatively via interviews. And so likewise, you look at, so all these other perceived risk influences, you need to find other studies that looked at these same relationships. It doesn't have to be on virtual assistants or chatbots. It could be other topics. Maybe it could be just other digital media, such as social media or mobile media, that looked at it. But you need to find other studies that looked at these constructs, same constructs, relationships, to justify your hypothesis. Once you have this model, once you know which theoretical frameworks you're using, and you developed your own conceptual model, this tells you everything that you need to conceptualize your study. From here, you can develop your questionnaire. This is even before you've finalized your title. So let's just go to this questionnaire. So example 1 questionnaire. So just to check that you can see the questionnaire on your screen, it says AI chatbots and virtual assistants marketing communication questionnaire. Students?
Indicated yes.
Yes, okay. So here's the questionnaire. So obviously, I mean, I'm not going to focus on all the usage characteristics, but so I give consent, have you used chatbots? So there's your filter questions. Then what do you mainly use? Which mediums? What sectors? How often? How many hours? You know, you have all of these usage aspects related to your construct, your topic, chatbots and virtual assistants. Then you have demographic factors as well, because you can do cross tabulations, as those of you in my class last year or previously will know about the GLMs, the generalized linear model. So it's good for cross tabs. And then you get to each element in this model. So you'll see here's financial benefits. We've mentioned the authors from where we took these sources from. I always tell my students to put the authors there so I can double check that these 4 Likert scale statements were clearly adapted from these 2 sources. And it's very important that you use validated journal article, reputable journal articles from which to develop your Likert scale items. Because if you don't, you have no reliability and you have no validity. In which case, all the questionnaires that people completed for you, you'll throw away. And it's happened. I've had students collect over 1,000 questionnaires, ran at validity and reliability. There was nothing. Start from scratch again. So the way to circumvent that is to make sure that you take these Likert scales from reputable studies. It's best to go to more of the original authors of this, but in this case, we went to slightly older, but not the original. And we developed then 5 statements from these 2 studies. 5 statements for social benefits, 5 statements for performance, all from the same authors. 5 for security and benefit, 5 for, or 4 for, I think there's 4 and 5 statements from these sources. Perceived usefulness, we took from the original TAM2, Venkatesh and Davis, and we took perceived ease of use also from the original source. This one we took from one of my studies, customer engagement. Attitudes we took from Taylor and Todd, and intention to purchase we took from one of my studies. So usually you want 3 to about 6 statements to measure each of these constructs. Once you've collected the questionnaires, then, well, for my students, I do the statistical analysis, and then we'll go back to the PowerPoint. You are able to test these relationships statistically. So that's what a typical questionnaire looks like, but that's just to show you the next, once you've done your conceptual model, complete your questionnaire even, before you've even finalized your topic. But you don't need to do that. Once you've got your conceptual model, so you've got your 2 theoretical frameworks, and this is what it looks like, and you found a lot of other studies that looked at similar relationships, but maybe for different topics. You're not replicating studies identically, then what's the point of conducting it? Even if they were conducted in a different country, you don't want to replicate exactly. You want to replicate this for your topic, which could be similar to other studies, but not exactly the same. Once you've got this, now you are able to go to your title. So let's go to the beginning. So you've decided your theoretical framework is the perceived risk or benefits model and technology acceptance model. Their broad theme in this instance was AI and marketing. The specific topic looked at AI chatbots and virtual assistants. The questionnaire, you can see we looked at it across industries, and you can look at one industry, but I say it's better to look at many industries, because you think if you just have one industry, then it makes it difficult for you to collect questionnaires. I have a student, for example, who's doing research in the real estate industry on social media, but it was very difficult for him to get questionnaires because a lot of his target market had not seen social media in the real estate industry. Anyway, that's for discussion when you get there. You need to consider your target group as well. Is it Gen Z, Y, X, baby boomers? Is it a certain type of user? Is it a organizations you're looking at? Your context, Cape Town, South Africa, where you're conducting the research. So based on this and based on their conceptual framework, the title of their research could be the influence of chatbot and virtual assistant marketing communication on intention to purchase. So take notice, we're only mentioning one variable, the main dependent variable in this model. In other words, everything is feeding into intention to purchase, which makes it the dependent variable. All of these are independent variables. This is also a dependent variable to these 8 variables, but it's an independent variable to intention to purchase. In other words, attitudes is independent. So you generally want to take the last item in your model, or the last 2 items in your model would go into your title. So the title, based on the conceptual frameworks, is the influence of chatbot and virtual assistant marketing on intention purchase among Gen Z and Y in South Africa. Now you've got your title, you've got your conceptual framework. It is very easy to come up with your aim. So the aim of the study is to consider various attitudes towards AI and chatbots. The attitudes include, now you can list them because you have them. The main research objective, to obtain the attitude or influence of AI chatbots, various attitudes. The secondary objectives, to examine intention to purchase. Remember, that's the main dependent variable. To establish what usage factors have an influence. So the usage factors are, you do cross-tabulation on intention to purchase, and to explore what demographic factors have an influence on intention to purchase. So you could do cross-tabulation of gender, age, various education and other aspects. So there you go. Because you know what's in your conceptual framework, you know what's in your questionnaire, it's easy to do this. And then your research questions, remember, are a mirror of the objectives. So instead of to ascertain the perceived attitude influence, it's now just what is the perceived attitude influence. And the same is applicable to these questions as well. It's just a mirror image of the objectives just stated as a question. Then you can go to hypothesis. Yes, go ahead.
So sorry.
No problem.
I think just for the students to see the alignment between that theoretical framework, the objectives, and the research questions, maybe just to go back for them to just see,
Okay.
get that title, and just to see how you take that title through into your objectives, into your research questions, and obviously it will also be reflected in your hypothesis. So I think it's the next slide.
Yeah, it's the next slide. So I'm just going to finish this slide and then I'm going to do the recap here of all of that.
Thank you.
Okay, so then your hypothesis, so now you've got your research questions, your research objectives, your title, your conceptual framework, your theoretical framework. Now you can work out your hypothesis. Well, you could do that easily enough because we're saying financial benefits positively influences Gen Z and Y's attitudes towards chatbots and virtual assistants. And financial benefits positively affects the intention of purchase. So if you go back to this model, we're just stating this 1A and 1B. Financial benefits has a positive influence on intention of purchase, has a positive influence on attitudes. Social benefits has a positive influence on intention of purchase and has a positive influence. If we looked at this from a negative point of view and we didn't rephrase the Likert scales positively, then you would, if this was financial risk, then you'd say financial risks has a negative impact on intention of purchase and financial risks has a negative impact on attitudes. But because we phrased it positively, it's positive. And so each of these lines is a hypothesis. So if we go back, you can see here each is a hypothesis. Okay, and each hypothesis needs to be justified by literature. So you need to find other studies that looked at the relationship between either financial benefits or risks, because most people look at it from a risk, but that's okay. It's the same thing. It's just looking at it from a negative viewpoint. Had an influence on people's attitudes, either in chatbots or virtual assistants or other AI platforms or social media or digital. You need to find at least 5 to 10 studies to justify each hypothesis and say these studies found positive, negative, or no influences. And then you say, therefore, it is hypothesized. And you would do this for each of your or you could group these actually 3 together because they're related. So let's just start from, so you need, as Dr. Williams said, there must be full alignment between your title, your introduction and research problem, which we're not discussing today, and your problem statement, your objectives, your questions, your hypothesis, your theoretical framework. So it generally starts at the theoretical and conceptual framework. Once you know which theoretical frameworks you're using, and then your take on it, which you've reformulated into a conceptual model, you can finalize your title. Then once you have your title, you can then go to your research objectives and questions because you know what's in your title. And then once you have that, you can go to your hypothesis. So, but even after the conceptual framework and theoretical model, you can do your title, then do a draft of your research instrument. What are you going to include it? Because if you know what's in your instrument, it helps you more with your objectives and questions. But you need to have done a lot of reading before you get to that. You need to have read 50 to 100 journal articles, I would say, related to that topic, and search for your specific models so that you know other people's models, and then you'll soon see a trend. Oh, they're doing this and this and that, and then they'll show you the gaps in their limitation section, what the gaps are, and from that then you would finalize your conceptual model. So you also want to fulfill some gaps via your research. It may not just be your conceptual model, it could be who you interview, it could be the actual topic you're doing. And then obviously those gaps form the basis of your background to your research problem and your research problem statement, recent studies that have highlighted certain gaps. So So yeah, let me go to another example. So example 2, they looked at the effect of Instagram influencers on intention to purchase amongst Gen Z. But let's jump ahead. So they used TAM and they used the source credibility model. And from that, they formulated this conceptual framework. So from the source credibility model, they took attractiveness, credibility, expertise, and trust. And from TAM, they took perceived usefulness, perceived ease of use, and intention to purchase. Remember, you need to have read a lot of other studies that also looked at various relationships, that also considered similar relationships, because if you can't find any studies that look at attractiveness and perceived usefulness, then how do you justify your hypothesis? Once you've got your conceptual model, if we just go out here and we go to example 2, just to show you the questionnaire. So again, like, do you have an Instagram? Do you follow others on Instagram? You have your usage characteristics, how long, how many hours, which categories, what's the reason, demographic factors, and then you come to your Likert scale. So they took trust from these two sources, credibility from these sources, expertise from these, attractiveness from these, perceived usefulness, perceived ease of use again from the original source, perceived use. So there's your questionnaire of the different constructs they look in. Once you have that, then if we go back to it, so their title was the effect of Instagram influences on intention to purchase. The main dependent variable was intention to purchase. Then the secondary objectives could be to explore the influence on intention to purchase, to assess the influence of usage factors on Instagram influences, to ascertain whether demographic factors had an influence, and here's hypothesis. So attractiveness has a positive influence on purchase intention. Credibility has a positive influence on purchase intention. And each of these need to be, again, substantiated by multiple studies. So just to show you another example, artificial intelligence and human social media influences moderate in effect on Gen Z consumers' purchase intention. So if we go and look at the models they used, they took the source credibility and they took the advertising value model. And just to go to the questionnaire, I think this is a recent study. So here they go. Do you follow AR social human influencers? Yes, no. Which types do you follow? Which social medias do you use? What categories, etc. All the usage, the demographic. But now have a look at this questionnaire. So they've gone back to the original authors. So trustworthiness, that took from Ohanian. 6 statements. Expertise, that took from Ohanian. This is much better than... Previously with my students, I just let them do their own thing for their questionnaires and then just say, send me the articles. But often I found that the sources they cited there and the Likert scales that they gave here did not align. So now when they do these questionnaires, I say, send me the articles and I will check that there is full alignment. So that is so vitally important, because if these are not strong, we're going to run into problems with reliability and validity. So if you've taken it from the original author and you've adapted it to your topic, we took trustworthiness and expertise from the original source. We took informativeness, entertainment, and we called this lack of irritation because we phrased it positively instead of negatively. And advertising value we took from Duffco. And then purchase intention, I've developed quite a robust scale, so they've taken that from my source. So this is a very, very strong questionnaire. Yes?
Two statements questions. Firstly, certainly this is a 1990 source.
Yes.
And in this instance, it's obviously seminal work.
Yes.
He's designed this model. So because of that, this is not seen as dated.
Yes, that's an excellent comment, is that for your constructs, they don't want you to have a 2025 or 2026 source. they want you to go back to the original author of that theoretical model, and preferably to use him, and then you can use him in conjunction if you want to with a more recent source who maybe also looked at social media influencers, who should have also used Ohanian as their basis. So it is best when designing these constructs to go to the original. If you can't use the original, because sometimes you just can't adapt it, then find someone else, a few years later that adapted it. But most of the time you can adapt them to a degree, and then find someone else that also maybe looked at social media influencers but also based their questions on Ohanian, and they could be a second person that would make it easier for you to adapt these statements. So yeah, it is important to go back to the original founders of the model if you are able to. So that's a very, very valid comment.
The second one is certainly this is the data collection instrument. This is the survey that you would use if you actually go to the people out there, to the consumer out there, and you collect data.
Yes.
But this you've drawn from the literature. So certainly when you write, and you write to the theories and you write to your conceptual model, this Ohanian would also be appearing in that text of yours whereby you refer to and write to the theoretical model and the conceptual model.
100%. You would say that Ohanian was the founder of this, but then, so that would be an old source. And my rule of thumb is always one old source to two recent sources, but you could say he's the founder. However, then you would say several other studies also looked at these recent studies, also looked at your topic, social media, and then you would reference those recent sources afterwards. So yes, that's how I approach it. Yeah.
So when they write about the theoretical model, that is where they'll bring in other researchers, the studies, those who developed, who founded these theories. So in that section, there should be quite a bit of referencing and literature, studies,
yes,
to support what is put forward as a theoretical model, support what is put forward as a conceptual model.
Yes, correct. So, and just remember that the conceptual model, though, is your take on the theoretical model. So all of these variables in your questionnaire are based on your conceptual model, but your conceptual model is based on a theoretical model which was developed by this person. So your conceptual model is adaptation of the theoretical model on your topic here.
So Prof, if you show this data collection instrument, this survey, can you just also show them, so there's the variables, can you also just show them the conceptual model that speaks to this, so that they can see almost like
so here's the conception.
But a mirror image. It's a mirror image in a different form.
It's a mirror image. So expertise is made up of 4 or 5 statements in your questionnaire.
Yeah.
Attractiveness is made up of 4 or 5 statements. Informative, entertainment, each one of these is represented by 4 or 5 statements in your research instrument. And so when people complete that instrument, and then when the statistical analysis is done, you are going to get a value for this expertise, and then there's various value for each of these. You'll get mean values, but they mean very little in statistics at this level. And then what's most important are these lines. So then you do different statistical structural equation modeling, regression analysis to see what the relationship are based on those respondents. And you would have had hundreds of respondents. Based on their responses, you would see what is the relationship of expertise on trustworthiness, of expertise on purchase intention. Yeah.
So Prof, if you look at this model, purchase intent, okay, and I look up to expertise, then we're saying there's a link between expertise and that intention to purchase.
Correct. We assume that,
if you look at,
we
if
are,
you look at your data, then you're going to analyze it by saying this is what the data says, so therefore there is a link between expertise and intention to purchase, or you're saying there is not a link.
yes. So if you look at the hypothesis, we're saying expertise has a noteworthy favorable impact on trustworthiness. Expertise has a noteworthy favorable impact on purchase intention. That's what we are hypothesizing. So in that questionnaire, these two hypotheses are denoted by these two lines. So we are saying, but you need to find other studies in justifying your hypothesis that also looked at expertise influence on purchase intention and trustworthiness. So that you can, when you write up, you don't list your hypothesis. You first need to write a paragraph above using at least 5 to 10 studies that looked at the same relationship. It may have not been on the same topic, social media influencers, but it could have been on, something else digital as well. And you can say these people found same results, these people found different results, these people found no results, therefore we hypothesize this. And then once you've got your results from the questionnaire, you can test your model. And that's what the questionnaire allows you. So the questionnaire is fully reflected, or you reflect in the questionnaire. You're taking each of these variables and you're putting it in your questionnaire, and you're then using 3 to 5 statements from these original people that use these original models, or the original model itself. But when you're reading journal articles, you should be taking note of which, like say you're interested in a certain topic, some type of branding. Some people, Dr. Steenkamp students looked at dark branding, or dark tourism branding. So those are sites like Robben Island. And so now you're reading up about dark branding, but you should be taking note, which theoretical models did they use to investigate those topics? What are the research gaps that they use to investigate their topics? And then based on that, you can say, okay, well, these are the common models, and I could combine these two models to form a new framework because there's sufficient literature to justify the different hypotheses that I am proposing. So while you're reading, not only looking at the research gaps, you need to be looking at what theoretical models, and then you need to find the original sources. So a lot of authors don't cite Duffcoat, they'll cite someone else after him. And a lot of them don't cite Tahani, and they'll cite, and you've got to work your way back until you find the original authors. And then you can decide if those later sources, do justice to the original theory. Because the later articles can become so diluted that they're not measuring the same thing anymore because they've adapted it too much. So that's why it's always good to have the original source as your benchmark to see what later people are doing, if their statements in their questionnaires are still, holding on to the original source. Because if you just use later sources, you may find that you're not going to get reliability and validity. And that could be problematic. So if I just go back, so this was the title and these were the objectives. So you can see the theoretical framework. Again, purchase intention was the main dependent variable. And, the research questions were to determine whether trustworthiness, expertise, and all of these had an influence on purchase intention. And then also to consider differences between AI and SMI effects. So they were using what's called multi-group analysis or moderation, but you don't need to worry about that now. And then they would also do cross-tabulation of the usage variables and demographic variables on intention to purchase as well. The hypothesis we've discussed, these are the theoretical frameworks, and this is the conceptual model. I think I want to pause here for a moment and just go back in the group. I don't know if you've got a headache yet, or are there any questions at this point? before I go to sort of a qual conceptual framework. All happy?
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, or I'm not seeing any hands. I think they are digesting.
That's a digesting. Okay. Let me just go back. Okay. So here was another example on WhatsApp, just to show you that they used a social presence theory. And from the social presence theory, they developed this model. They took these 4 variables and they're looking at human conversation and corporate voice in terms of WhatsApp. And then from that, they could develop their questionnaire and their titles, the influence of tone of voice, and their questions. And then another example is the influence of advertising on purchase intention. So the models they used was TAM and advertising value, and this is what their framework looked like, or similar to another. But now let's just go to a qualitative. Qualitative is a bit more difficult because qualitative is usually exploratory. So, but yet you can still base your qualitative research on a theoretical model, and in fact you have to. So here someone used the TAM model, and so they said, well, when we set up our interview guide, we're going to make quite sure we have questions that ask about people's social media behavioral intention, about the perceived ease of use, about the perceived usefulness in their open-ended, like interview guides, usually 10 to 20 open-ended questions that you ask people and you prompt. And so you get a lot of different themes then emerge, usually 5 or 6 major themes, and then under those themes, subcategories develop. But they decided they're going to use the TAM model, so they called their title was Social Media as a Marketing Communication Strategy Amongst Health-Related Non-Profit Organizations. And then they just said to identify whether health NPOs use social media, the level they use, determine the strategies, assess the challenges. And at this stage, it was just post-COVID that they did this research just to examine their use during COVID. But the conceptual model, you cannot, for qualitative research, usually develop at the beginning. Like quantitative research, you first have your conceptual model and then you test it. Whereas qualitative research, you usually develop in your model after data collection. But you cannot develop it afterwards if you did not have a theoretical model in mind at the beginning, so that you actually had questions in your interview guide that made sure that it collected data on all of these variables. So it differs definitely in qualitative. So after they had collected the data and they came up with their themes and their categories, in their chapter 6, in their discussion, they could then say, take from across themes and categories the external variables that influence non-profit organizations in terms of social media usage. So they had positive influences and they had negative influences. And the perceived usefulness, they had positive influences and negative influences. Perceived ease of use, they had positive, negative. The behavioral intentions, these organizations had positive and negative, and the actual usage, okay, those that used it, there's no negative, it's just these were the variables. So this model was developed after data collection for qualitative. But as I say, you must have a theoretical model in mind so that once you've collected your data and you've done your results section, you're then able to maybe replicate the model, extract from across themes and categories to create some type of theoretical model afterwards. And then someone could quantitatively test this maybe, later, because qualitative becomes before quantitative research. So you just need to, it's a bit more difficult to develop a conceptual framework. You can propose, you can't hypothesize in qualitative research, but you can propose that, what you feel the outcomes will be based on your qualitative research. So that's just to show you that qualitative is not quite the same but you still need to look at the theoretical model in advance so that when you get to your discussion, based on your findings, you can then kind of see we've replicated this model, except instead of using statistics, we've used words, because that's what comes out of qualitative research. So yeah, just in conclusion, the main thing is to remember is this research alignment. So generally you start in, when you're reading about the topic, you're first looking for research gaps, and you're looking at the theoretical models that they're using. And based on those gaps, you could develop your conceptual framework, finalize your title, your objectives, your questions, your hypothesis. You could do your research instrument already, and then obviously you can do all this big writing part, the background and problem statement. So just to say that, I've had students that have come to me at doctoral level and said, here's my title and here's my conceptual framework. That's it. They gave me one diagram and the title, and I accepted them for their doctorate, because the conceptual framework showed me I could see the study from beginning to end because of that. So, that's so important, that because until you've got that conceptual model, you actually don't know what you're doing. Obviously, qualitative research, it's a bit more tricky, it's not as clear-cut, but for quantitative research, until you've got that theoretical conceptual model that's based on one or two theoretical frameworks, you don't know what you're doing. And I won't accept students at that stage unless I can get a vision and guide them. But most of the time it's so mixed up that you just say, well, I can't guide them. But if you can come, say next year you're applying for masters, and you come with a well-worked conceptual framework and a good title, and it's obviously in our research interest areas, because that's what we accept you on, based on research in our interest areas, then yeah, I'll be happy, because it shows me everything. A bonus if you had a questionnaire ready. Forget about all the other writing bits. If I can visualize your study from beginning to end, then I'm happy you've done half the job. Yep.
If I may, just on what you have said, and I'm aligned with what you're saying. Maybe if you could just show the conceptual framework again, because you said I can visualize, and what I'm saying is that when you present your conceptual framework, you're actually showing whoever's reading, but you're presenting your conceptual framework in a graphic form. And Professor David is saying I can visualize. So as it looks at this, you can see you are saying there's some link between financial benefits and attitudes towards, what is that, VA and chatbots?
Virtual assistants.
Saying, there's a link between financial benefits and intention to purchase. So when you look at this picture, this graph, visual presentation of the conceptual model, you can actually read it.
Yes.
Look at the arrows. If you look at where these arrows are going, and it's telling a specific story.
Yeah.
So this is what Professor Duffett is saying. This is your conceptual model. And just another note also, if you think of your theoretical model, remember we're always saying that when you do research, as academic research, you need to be able to back it up with existing studies. So your theoretical model you've drawn from other studies and researchers in the field. So it's all connected, so that at the end of the day what you put forward is an academic study. Thank you, Prof.
Can I also just add that we call in this diagram a conceptual model, right? But when you write this up, you're also going to write this up. You're going to write a paragraph on this actual conceptual model and giving background information and talking about these relationships. Then it's called a conceptual framework. So this diagram itself is called the model, but when you add literature to it and discuss it, then that section would be called the conceptual framework. So just take note of that. The model is just the diagram, and the conceptual. This, again, this external variables, this is actually the theoretical model of Davis, but the moment you discuss it with literature, it then becomes the theoretical framework. Okay, so just the actual diagram itself are called the theoretical model, and this is called the conceptual model. But when you explain it or discuss it with literature and you're explaining what's happening here, then it becomes the theoretical framework. So just that's how I sort of differentiate between a framework is the model plus literature, and the model is the model itself, the diagram for theory, and the conceptual model is just the model, but when you have literature and discuss it, then it's the model plus literature equals the framework. Just some technical jargon. So yeah, that's my story. I don't have anything more to say. It was basically exactly an hour. Yes, go ahead, Mubuleka. You still on?
Hi, good evening, Prof.
Yeah.
Doc and the rest of the class. I joined a little bit late, like 10 minutes late. I don't know if this was covered before I came in or not. But when I looked at the diagrams, the conceptual model, obviously, whatever topic that you are on about influences how that looks like. It doesn't have to be as I don't want to say as busy. I want to say as
Complex.
Complex.
as complex.
No, it doesn't. Look here, I've got students that their studies, let me just show you. It can be much simpler. Let me just go into someone's work. Quickly. Let's go into JD's quickly. Thesis examination. Open his thesis. I don't know if it's a final version, but if I go down, oh, it will probably be chapter 1, hey? Just after this. So here's his model. You can see how simple that is. It's just
Absolutely.
6 variables into one. That's how simple. But it depends on what theoretical models you actually end up using. It doesn't matter on the topic. The theoretical models are independent, they're obviously related, like technological acceptance related to digital. But I mean, you can use a lot of theories across different platforms and sectors and whatnot. So it can be as simple as this. If I go to just another example, if I go to one of Dr. Williams's master students, let's just go here quickly just to show you another example. What's her name, Sandra?
What is that?
What's her surname? Modissa. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So I helped her with her statistics. Let's just see if I included it here. Yeah, I would have. So here's Wadissa's model. It's very simple. Trust, loyalty into its 5 variables. So it is possible to be much similar. It just depends on, what you attempt. And these were quite strong regression results. So It depends on obviously what you want to investigate, the articles, the sources you've looked at, depends on many, many variables. So, sorry, just my master students generally, because I'm supervising them and, um, I may be a bit more complex than some people. I'm simple, but I'm complex when it comes to stats. I enjoy it, so they end up having fairly complex models. But whether you have 5 variables or 10 variables, it actually doesn't. It looks complicated, but actually, you're just looking at the lines. You're just looking at this has an influence on that. So whether you've got 5 or whether you've got 10, you're just looking at each line, those relationships. So it's actually not very complex, this model, at all. It just looks complicated. So, but you can have fewer constructs. That's what you're really asking. If you have fewer, then obviously it's going to look simpler, but it can still produce good results.
Thank you so much, Prof. Much appreciated.
Good. Any other questions?
I don't see any hands, nor do I see anything in the chat, Prof.
No, well, that's good. Then I'm going to stop recording. Stop recording this, Dr. Williams.
Thank you so much, Professor Tufford. I must say, every time that I sit in your lecture, I learn every time. So thank you very much. And when I say I learn every time, it's also, besides the new knowledge, it's also how to